All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So tonight we have a very interesting topic because it's a big celebration, I guess, today. No, it's not about the International Women's Day. It's about being for 1 year in lockdowns. I don't know how this coincided, but yeah. So it was about a year ago that our lives changed completely. Who would have thought that we would be stuck in our houses for such a long time in fear of getting sick and in fear of inflicting harm on others by passing them a disease that has a 98% survival rate, isn't it? So we've been in lockdown for a year, and I think um, different people experienced it in different ways, depending on their jobs, depending on their uh, family lives, depending on what goes on, and depending on the countries that they reside in, and they had different experiences. So, to discuss those different experiences, we have today with us Annie, we have Dr. Ellen, and we have Nikos, who I believe is the only objectivist professor of sociology, or sorry, senior lecturer of sociology. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I'm demoting you or promoting you.
No, you're not, but it's not that there are like many professors of sociology. So if one day I become a professor and I don't get cancelled till then, I will be the first professor of sociology who's an objectivist.
Okay, great, thanks. So between our guests, we have about 5 countries, so different experiences of how lockdown went for them. And tonight, I would like us to discuss those a bit and maybe understand whether some situations and some countries manage better than others, and how that was reflected in people's everyday lives. So, if we can start from Annie. Annie, could you tell us a bit more your story of lockdown?
I'd be happy to, George. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
So, well, it's a rather long story. I'm going to try to keep it as brief as possible, because I'm very interested in hearing the other stories as well. But until almost a year ago, I was living in France, southern France, nice sunny France, and then the pandemic happened. And what caused the biggest change was the fact that government regulations and restrictions during this pandemic prevented not only my daughter, but me as a big part of her life from living out our purposes. So for the past 7 years, my daughter has been working, and she's 13 now. She's been working all her spare time, like 4 or 5 hours every day and more in the weekends, with her horses. And she's preparing for the 2028 Olympics. And then on March 15 last year, the French president announced a complete lockdown of France. And when French make regulations like that, they go all in. So everything was canceled. All sport activities, you had to have download a special form from the internet just to leave your house. So the first couple of days, the Minister of Agriculture, who's in charge of equestrian activities, announced that horse owners could continue caring for their horses. These are living animals. It's not like football. You leave the ball in the stadium and nothing really happens. I mean, the grass will grow or whatever, but horses, you can't just leave them somewhere. And so we thought, okay, we're going to be fine. Our horses were at an equestrian center, and we had to follow the rules of social distancing, printing this form every time we left, but we were fine. But then a couple of days later, so mind you, there was an election coming up in all the regions of France. There was an election last fall. And of course, there were a lot of local politicians who saw their chance to fight their own little battles in this. And one of them was our local equestrian committee member, who had been receiving, at least he posted that on Facebook on March 18. He had been receiving complaints from people who did not have their own horses, but who used to come and just ride horses that belonged to the club, or rented horses in the clubs. And they were complaining that they were not allowed to continue this activity. And they thought that it was unfair that people who had their own horses were allowed to continue. So he actually wrote a long post on Facebook announcing that, you know, in solidarity with people who had not, who were not able to ride their own horses, people who had horses should abstain from riding, and you know, if our forefathers suffered through wars, you know, we could suffer through this for as long as it should take. And actually, I thought that was a joke, but the very next day, the president of the Equestrian Federation, he announced that, well, you know, there was a good point in this. Apparently, they'd received a lot of complaints, so they actually convinced the minister that it should be illegal for horse owners to access their equines, their horses. And not only was it illegal, but it was considered fraud because it would give horse owners a competitive advantage to access their horses. So
can I ask you a little question? It's not a team sport, right? So you don't really need to come in contact with other people when you practice horse riding. In some ways, it was running allowed, because in the UK we were allowed to get out of the house and go for a run.
Yeah,
was running permitted?
You were allowed, but you needed to fill out that form, and you were not allowed to stay out for more than 1 hour per day running or whatever. And so you could only.
What's the difference? Why allow the running and not allow running on top of a horse? The horse is doing the running for you, but you know.
Well, this was the way I saw it. This was clearly a political agenda, that there was an election coming up, and there's a wave in France right now of very, very leftist. The communists are really on the rise there, and particularly in the southern part, which is called Occitanie, where we used to live, which is the northern part of Catalonia. And you know, in Catalonia, they're fighting for independence from the Spanish government, and they're very leftist in that area.
But
so they saw an opportunity here to fight for, you know, the equality. Communist agenda of.
Yeah.
Sorry?
But they also wanted equality in terms of lack of access to horse.
Yeah.
So it's like saying, if libraries were closed, if you have books at your home, don't read them because you have an unfair advantage against the people that don't have books in their libraries. So we're going to burn your books for this reason, or we're going to stop you from accessing your books.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did that go down then? What?
Well, you know, they then made a quick passing of a law to include this under the fraud, as you know, it would be considered fraud to either for you to access your horses, or even for the person running an equestrian center to give you access to your horse. And it was punishable with a fine of 15,000 euros. That's $18,000. And 1 year prison. I kid you not.
Wow.
Yeah. So those were the terms, and of course, the equestrian center where we had the horses, we still had to pay them to feed them and to take care of them and to ride them if they had the time, because suddenly they had, you know, the responsibility of all these horses. They were usually taken care of and activated by their owners. And horses, they lose their muscle mass just as humans. If you just don't do nothing, they lose their muscle mass very fast. And these were high competitive horses, so they were in good shape. They used to be in good shape. So of course we continued to pay for this, and then very interestingly, a month and a half after, around April 22, there was a survey made among equestrian centers. It was published that showed that 67% of all members who did not have a horse of their own had canceled their memberships and thus their payments to the equestrian centers, whereas only 6% of horse owners had canceled their memberships. So we had all these equestrian centers who were suffering financially because they lost a big part of their income, and they still had to take care of the club horses that were usually ridden by the ones who just had a membership. So, and then on top of this, they changed the law of force majeure so that the horse owners, we would not be able to sue neither the Equestrian Federation, the government, or the equestrian center if they didn't feed the horses or if they didn't take care of them if they got sick. So there we were, no access to to our horses, and with nothing to do about it. We're not allowed to move them. That was illegal as well. So of course I started looking for an alternative, and I found out that in Denmark, my native country, they were still riding the horses under social distancing rules, because like you said, George, you know, you go by yourself, you take care of your horse, and then you go and take it into either a big riding, you know, like a riding hall or just outside. So so this was actually out in the open air in southern France. It's 320 sunny days, so you know, didn't really have to go outside. So yeah, so I found out that in Denmark they were still doing this, and I started working on a solution. But of course, we're not allowed to move anywhere. And so I contacted the Danish embassy, and they gave us a permission to move, but we could not get the permission from the French government until May 15, when they finally opened up a little bit, and that's when we took our horses.
Permission to leave the country? What permission was this? So there
permission
was no
just to leave the local community. Okay. Yeah. So, and to get the horses out of the equestrian center.
Yes.
We needed permission to that because we're not allowed to transport them. That was another rule. So even if I could rent a car to transport them in, I was not allowed to pick them up. So so finally on May 15, we were allowed to pick them up, and then we picked up the horses, and then we drove the 2,300 kilometers to Denmark. And,
wow. And then how did it go in Denmark?
Here ever since.
Not, but the rules didn't change in Denmark, right? You're still allowed to practice horse riding.
Oh yeah, and we've been throughout this entire, ever since my daughter has been, you know, riding her horses every day. And there was, when we picked up the horses from that equestrian center where they were in France, they had lost so much muscle. They were filthy. One of them had fleas in her fur, and it was horrible.
So I bet this is a concern for a lot of people that are aspiring athletes, right? They're young, so they're not like in the spotlight. They're not, you know, doing like sports, like they're not in the Premier League or whatever. They're not famous footballers, but they are hopefuls. They're young. They want to practice in order to develop their talent to get somewhere later on in life. But with all these activities being banned for them, they have to look for alternatives. And I mean, well done for being so brave to basically uproot your whole life, get up and leave and go somewhere else where you can help your daughter practice her sport.
The good thing about this that came out of this is that my daughter is now very much aware of, you know, she got focused on justice and on what the proper role of government is. And we discussed this at length because we had every day together during that lockdown period, and she was frustrated and she was, you know, sad, and she was really mourning, you know, not being able to do not only her sport, but not being able to see her horses. And to explain to a kid why this could even happen, why we could be in a situation like that, that was tough.
Yeah.
But we got her to understand some things, and I think that she became stronger for it, and that she's definitely much more aware of justice and purpose in life, and how to go for things and not stop at obstacles, but trying to find solutions if you're stopped along the way when you're going for your.
So I wonder with this one, if okay, your horse was in an equestrian center,
Yeah.
assuming a case where someone had their own land, their own stables, and their horses in there, and they could practice within their own property, would the government still say, hang on, you still have an unfair advantage for doing that, so we're going to stop you from practicing even in your home? Or did they not go that far?
Yes, they did. Unless you were, after a few weeks, the professional community of, the ones who were doing riding for a profession, they had complained so much that they were allowed, but unless you had a license as a professional rider, which cost around 500 euros per year, you were not allowed. So if police came by and saw you riding in your own field on your own horse, you could get a fine the first time of 250 euros, and then it was exponential. So the third time you made they caught you like this, you would get 6 months prison. So yeah, so that's how they reacted to that, because they were scared that riding is a dangerous sport. So they were scared that you would get into an accident, and then you'd have to go to the hospital, and that would put pressure on the hospitals. Because
how dangerous is it? Is it real? Are you being sarcastic, or do you actually mean it, that horse riding is so dangerous that you could be having so many people going to hospitals that it would cause
you wouldn't.
Yes.
I mean, and then you would really have, people shouldn't be riding their horses if they were if they got into accidents so much.
Yeah.
But that was the was the explanation.
That was the rationale. Well, I think we should,
not even your private property.
I was feeling very jealous of people that managed to get weights and barbells and things like that during lockdown in their homes and in the garages. So I think maybe we could campaign to the British government to ban them from using their exercise equipment at home, isn't it? Because it's unfair. When we go to the beach in the summer, they will all be like ripped and have like amazing bodies, and the rest of us, no training, we will just be not that good. Wow. But it reminded me of another article. I remember, I think it was in the Atlantic, which said that something along the lines, you shouldn't be reading to your kids at bedtime because you're giving them an unfair advantage against other children who their parents don't read to them. Yeah. And it's this mentality that basically reveals the philosophy of envy that underpins those arguments and these ideas. Okay, well, thank you, Annie. That was good. I think all's well that ends well. You're happy in Denmark?
Very much.
Yeah, it's no sunshine. It's not sunny like France, like the south of France.
No.
But
it's been a very cold winter, so I had to get used to that again. But we're happy, and my daughter is happy to be able to pursue her sport again, and I'm happy.
Great, that's fantastic. Okay, thank you, Annie. Shall we go to Ellen next? Hi, Ellen.
Sure. So, Annie, when you said that your daughter was training for the Olympics, I went on your Facebook page and looked at pictures of her jumping or videos that you had. That is just amazing. And for this to happen during that period is just, right when she's growing and developing and enthusiastic about her future. She is so lucky to have you as a mom, because you were able to put it in perspective, to as you say, take action, teach her some perseverance. So just
Thank you,
amazing.
Ellen.
I wish her the best with that, and you.
Thanks.
So my story is a lot easier. We are in a very wonderful spot of Florida. We are in a very wonderful spot of the country. First, can you hear me okay, George?
Yeah.
You can hear me okay.
Yeah.
So we left Rhode Island because it was becoming politically suffocating. I was very involved with politics there, and they were introducing, climate change was just the tip of the iceberg. They wanted control. They wanted food equity. It's bizarre. They had opportunity maps in Rhode Island. I'll be very brief with this because it's traumatizing for me to go back there to think about it. But I was heavily politically involved. They had something called opportunity maps. We had a plan, Rhode Island Rising, I think it's called now, or at least it was last year. It was called Roadmap Rhode Island. And it was basically the Sustainable Development Plan that controlled every aspect of your life. Where you lived, you couldn't live in single family homes because that's racist. Of course, I always knew that, right? They opportunity maps, they mapped out the wealthiest communities in Rhode Island, but they did this around the world, not just in Rhode Island. And we could see the map of Rhode Island, and the wealthiest communities was where they wanted to put their so-called affordable housing.
Sorry, can I ask, because I'm not sure I heard you right. You are not allowed to have single family homes.
No, that's the direction they're going in. By the year 2030, it was changed to, it was originally called Agenda 21.
Okay.
Everybody thought it was a conspiracy theory. Then it changed to Sustainable Development. Then the last I knew, it was Agenda 2030, or Agenda for the year 2030.
So by that year, the plan is not to be able to live in a home as a single family, but you'll have to have someone else from another family.
Right. In what do they call it? A COVID, if we had COVID, we'd all be living on top of one another. But green communities that were near mass transportation. Oh my God, this isn't my story. So we left, Harris and I, when they passed that plan, when unelected officials passed that plan and the legislature started to enact it, Harris and I left Rhode Island and we moved to this amazing place, a new country called Florida. And it is so much freer here. We still have a home in Rhode Island. So I'll focus on lockdown now. That's the context.
Yeah.
We came during lockdown, right before it happened, a few days earlier though, my daughter and my grandson, my 4-year-old grandson, had visited for the first time, and it was wonderful. And they left, and that's the last that I've seen of him in person. I also have 2 twins. I don't have them. My daughter had 2 twins that were they're now 2.5 years old now. I haven't seen them in over 1.5 years now. My son had a baby in January, not my son, my daughter-in-law had a baby in January, and I hadn't seen them for a year. So lockdown, as a grandmother, I'm in Florida, my family's up north, and we just Zoomed. I love Zoom. We made the best of it. I did not traumatize myself and focus on all the fact that I couldn't hug them in person and that they couldn't be as bonded with me until I got to see them. But I got a lot of stuffed animals and I play with stuffed animals on the screen. So we did that. My dad is 94. He's up in Rhode Island. He got very ill. Actually, it looked like he was dying. They took him to the hospital. I wasn't there. We were able to manage everything from home. He got a pacemaker and he's back home doing well, but he has to have round the clock care. So we had to manage, illness. My son is a ballroom dance teacher, not just a teacher. He is the photographer for ballroom dance competitions around the country. He was driving out to the biggest one in the States called the Ohio Star Ball. which is the one that does the PBS series, the America's Ballroom Challenge. He was the photographer for that. First time he got that position, driving out to Ohio from Massachusetts, gets a call that they canceled it because of COVID. So he's back on the road now. He was in Atlanta, he's going to St. Louis. They're having ballroom comps again. So in Florida, I just managed, Harris and I were in heaven. We are on a beach. If I turned this around, you might be looking into the sun, but you would see the Gulf of Mexico. It is gorgeous here. So we were so lucky to be locked down in paradise. And we made the best of it. We don't panic that much because we're so prepared for hurricanes. We watched because we get hurricanes in the Gulf. So we have our go bag, we have our packed suitcases ready to go. We have food stored. So we did go out and buy the necessary toilet paper and paper towels. But that went pretty well.
Let me ask you.
Sure.
Can I ask you one question? The reason why you didn't see your family through this time, I mean, you didn't see them in person, obviously you used Zoom. Is it because of the distance, or is it because there were restrictions in terms of—
No, there were no, in Florida, we could go. We'd have to quarantine for 14 days. For example, we went to New Jersey or Rhode Island, depending on when it was. But we could have left and just gone into hibernation at a hotel someplace. We couldn't go there. But my daughter was really terrified to have us come on a plane or anyway and see them, because she was in charge of 3 young children 24/7, her husband working at home too, and she could not afford to have any of her kids sick. As much as she would have loved my help, it just wasn't feasible. So we just gave it up. And also my husband's in his 70s. In early March, about a year ago, we went to our last dance class, ballroom dance. My husband and I do it just as a hobby. And when we left, within probably a week or 2 weeks, we got the first death from COVID. We heard that his name is George, sorry about that, George, but 85-year-old man that I used to dance with a lot, real peppy, real fun. He had died of COVID. So that made it real. Then our dance teachers, 4 of them came down with COVID. And I said, we can't play with this. And there was so much uncertainty about it. My husband being in his 70s, I'm almost up there myself. And I just said, we just can't take the risk. We value our lives that much. And of course, we're in paradise. So P.S. It was wonderful here. So we basically don't have a detailed story. My son did come down here. My son, daughter-in-law, the baby, and their dog flew down here. They don't allow dogs on planes anymore here, or at least they stopped recently. Or animals or squirrels. You can't bring your pet squirrel anymore. But it's been very liberal in Florida. You can wear your mask. You have to wear your mask. Many of the towns say you have to wear it if you go into a store. There'll be signs. But we can go on the beach without a mask. We can walk around without a mask. We went to a farmer's market and there were tons of people there. It looked normal. So I don't have.
Is there a curfew? Because I know that in France they had a curfew after 6 o'clock at some point.
Not in Florida. Not in Florida. We had lockdown at the beginning, and we listened to our town council meetings online. And I loved our mayor at the time because he said that he knows he's violating individual rights and he hates that he's doing it with these lockdowns. But it was at the very beginning and he wanted to open things up. He wanted to open up the economy as soon as possible. And I wrote to him, I just thanked him that he at least acknowledged that he valued individual rights and felt guilty violating his oath as doing that.
Can I ask you a question? Did he get a lot of negative commentary and backlash for this?
Yeah, we have a lot of, he actually went on to higher politics. He's a phenomenal man. And now we probably have a bunch of greenies here. But
do you remember the film Jaws with a shark? Yeah,
No.
you've all seen it, right? Who's the
The
evil
mayor
character?
who doesn't close the
Yes.
source. Yes.
Yes, the evil guy, the villain of the story is the mayor who just wants people to do whatever they like, and he doesn't want to close the beach because obviously there's businesses that are relying on this, and he's such a terrible character.
He was so good like that. He wanted to leave things more open. It closed it first because nobody knew what the heck was going on, but he wanted to open it up as soon as possible. But we have an elderly population. I'm on an island, and we have a relatively elderly population here, and they were all complaining, saying, you have to mandate masks. And it became a big political football that, who was pro-mask, who was not anti-mask, but letting people be free and being grown-ups and deciding for themselves. So it became a big virtue thing. And I think that people were elected based on that. But our governor is great here. He's trying to open up the economy. And we're very lucky. Up in Rhode Island, they're communists. They're trying to close it in. The people in charge. In fact, our governor, Gina Raimondo, I think is now the Commerce Secretary. She did a horrible job in Rhode Island. And Biden, I think, has her as his Rhode Island. Rhode Island was the petri dish to just push through communism in the States, fascism. But anyway, my husband and I have not suffered. We've had walking beach, if you call that suffering, yeah.
One question that I would have to all three of you, and then we can go to Nikos' story as well, is, do you think that the difference in approach may stem from the fact that the healthcare in the US is private or more private than in Europe? Therefore, in Europe, we're kind of saying, okay, if my neighbors, if everyone gets sick around me, then they will go to hospital and I will be paying for all those treatments. So in effect, if they're not careful, everyone's in each other's pocket. So everyone's business, everyone's health is everyone's business.
It's like
it's not as simple.
Right. It's like the tramp, Jeff Allen from Atlas Shrugged, where he says, you didn't want, what's the girl who got her teeth knocked out and you wanted the older lady to die. She was really nice. And before this 20th century plan, not 20th century, but this communist plan, you remember the tramp that Dagny allows to come on? Yes. She rescues on the bus and on her train, on her car, and then gives a job eventually. I just love Atlas.
Yeah.
But yes, it is that envy. No, we don't have that here. Ours wasn't private, but we just have a healthier government. I mean, I got my 2 shots. I have my 2 vaccines already. And it was messy. The first few days we made national news. Harris and I got up at 3 a.m, got to the place at 4. They had already filled up at 2 for the second day of the vaccine. The first day of the vaccine, we got there at 7:30 and then forget it. So it was crazy.
The argument that is being given to us, and I'm based in the UK, so the argument here is not stay at home to save your life, it's stay at home to save the NHS, right? So it's to save the NHS. The NHS is the National Health Service. So it's basically you are staying at home to help the survival of an organization.
It's a corrupt organization, right? It's the altruism.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say whether it's corrupt or not, but what I have to say is that because of its nature, because everyone is invested in it, whether they like it or not, and everyone's actions have consequences on everyone else's pockets, and it's really difficult to detangle this mess of interests because they all are bundled in one place, then everyone has an opinion about what everyone else is doing. So, people will judge you if you are not following the rules 100%, and they will say, oh, you are the reason why now there is a lot of people in hospital, and the hospital will collapse because they don't have enough staff or enough equipment. And there is not, with private healthcare, you have this point where you say, okay, look, I'm taking my own risks for myself, and I'll pay the consequences, whatever those are. If I'm gonna get sick, I'll go to the hospital, I'll pay for the doctor, and the doctor will see me. But with this state healthcare that we have in the UK, it's just impossible to make that argument properly.
Now, just as an example, at 10 o'clock today, my grandson got, he was not doing well at all. By 11 o'clock, we were in the doctor's office here, private health care. 11 o'clock, that's within an hour, we were there, and the doctor was looking at him and prescribing medication. It's just, private is wonderful.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Ellen. Shall we move on now? Nicos.
Okay,
Your
my
turn.
story has 6 different parts, so feel free to let me know if I take too much time. So first lockdown in the UK, and at some point around May, I'm really creeped out. And one of the things that creeps me out is this claustrophobic, save the NHS, stay safe. What do I mean? So I would take a walk outside, and every house would have a sign that said, save the NHS, thank you NHS. And there was this thing every Thursday that they would clap for the NHS. So I respect the doctor so much. Like, I have a friend who's doctor. Every now and then I text him, how are you? I would just say thank you, because he would, he would reassure me, he says, don't worry, it's not that, anyway, he was great. So I respect the doctors, but I found this whole clapping thing a bit creepy. So the highlight that I have from the first lockdown in the UK is I was walking by the river away from the town, and I was listening to Atlas Shrugged, and I was really into it. And then at some point I realized there's something like, if you've experienced an earthquake in Greece, there's like this undercurrent of sound coming. And I realized that it was the clapping. It was so hard, so noisy.
And some people got their pots and pans out, and they were.
Oh yeah, the pots and pans, Yeah. That was it. The pots and pans. Yeah. Anyway, so at that point, things were much better in Greece. It was clear that there's no light in the end of the tunnel in the UK. So I say, okay, I'm gonna go to Greece. I had a place to isolate.
Sorry? When you say better, the things were better, what do you mean better?
Greece locked down very, very early. And in the first quote wave, let's say the worst day was 120 cases, not deaths, cases.
Okay.
So by May, it was something like 2 cases, 5 cases per day. We're talking about these kind of numbers. So I found a place where I could isolate for 14 days, a friend's Airbnb, which was empty. So then the new adventure was flying to Greece. Technically, I wasn't allowed to. A, because I had no reason to travel within the UK, but B, there was no flight from UK to Greece. So I found the flight, it was canceled. Then I find another flight through Germany. So I would stay a night in Frankfurt at the airport, and then from Frankfurt to Greece. The new adventure then is to find the mask, because believe it or not, in May, you couldn't find a mask anywhere in the UK. So I would go to pharmacies. I would hear rumors that there is one pharmacy that if you go very early in the morning, you might find masks. So 6 days before the flight or something like that, I find some good masks. And it was like a rumor. Someone says, go, and you can also go there. And so I find the masks. And one day before I leave, I try to, to check in the flight. And I get a message, you're not allowed to check in for flight you want due to restrictions and so on. So I say, okay, I knew it would happen. Probably I'm not going to fly. So I call Lufthansa. They say, no, it's because the system thinks you're flying from the UK to Greece. Go to the airport and we'll see. So I go to the airport, not sure whether actually I'm going to fly. Turns out I could fly. And then I spent one of the weirdest nights of my life in Frankfurt airport, because I had a space which, imagine the size of, let's say, the Olympic Stadium, okay, not the football one. Imagine a huge shopping center, completely empty. That was the space I had in Frankfurt airport, only for myself. So I would spend the night walking up and down, because the flight was in the morning. Anyway, the morning comes, but I'm in very good mood because I'm going to Greece. So we land in Greece, and then it's how people say about.
Was it a full flight? Was it?
Sorry.
Was the were either of the flights full, or were they
quite quasi full?
Okay, half empty. No.
Yeah, and I was flying beside two girls. I think they were from China, but they had this culture and education of how to fly safely. So you could see they know exactly how to wear the mask. They know exactly how to clean their hands. So it was reassuring, because in other flights I had people who would, let's say, take out their mask they had no idea about the mask. So, and this was my first experience with the mask. So it was quite reassuring. So I land in Greece, and then the government takes over. So they put us in a room to test us, and then they put us in a bus. And they say, you're going to go to a hotel. If your test comes out negative, you're free to go to your own quarantine. If your test is positive, you stay 14 days in the hotel.
When they put you in the bus, again, I have to ask, because this, to me, logistically doesn't make sense. When they put you in the bus, they put you all together close to each other, or they space you out?
They spaced that out relatively. Notice that there was like 5 flights per day. So it was logistically.
Okay.
This was the 23rd of May I landed in Greece. So the tourist period hadn't really started. So the most real experience was the hotel, actually, because it was like a concentration camp. There were some megaphones outside of the room, and the megaphones was not only to announce, let's say, flight X, everyone is negative, you can leave. It was also messages by the government. So it was messages, we stay vigilant, we stay careful, make sure that, and I was like, I just want to sleep. Anyway, in the evening, I get a call, it says, you're negative, leave. So I go to the quarantine to my friend's house for 14 days. That was such a beautiful feeling, because I was like, look, whatever happens, I'm in Greece, plus I'm not danger to anyone. This is a nice feeling. So then I stay for almost 2 months in Greece. And in Greece at that point, the situation is almost normal. You can go out. You can go out at night. Of course, I was very careful because I was living close to my family. But you wouldn't really notice that something was. So Greece was having almost a normal summer. Then I go back, and also I realized first time in my life how much your environment where you live matters. So the fact that I would go out, I could walk, I could see the sea, I would walk to the sea. That was such a beautiful feeling. Then I go back to the. Sorry.
That's when I met you, right?
No.
When I came to see you.
No, that's the second. That's the second part. I'm getting to that.
Oh.
And also, but at some point I had to leave because we make some huge rearrangements in the house, because we split basically the house in 3, so my sister could live with her husband and the baby. And now I have a small basement area. So, but at that point it was under construction. So I was like, okay, I need to go back to the UK. A, there's nowhere to stay here. B, I need to sort out some business. Turns out I didn't, because the university was basically still closed. Anyway, so I go to the UK. The UK is now better. The UK now is outside of the lockdown. I forgot to say, in the first lockdown, I couldn't even do pull-ups in the park. There was a park where the closest person is like 2 kilometers away, and they have one pull-up bar. And they had it surrounded because it was supposedly dangerous to go there. So now we are, let's say, end of July, beginning of August. The UK is almost normal. I remember I even had a Krav Maga training, so I could go and train with my co-athletes. Anyway, then 22nd of August, I'm like, I miss Greece. I want to go back to Greece, because also I started a tradition that I want to be in Greece in the birthday of my niece. So I was here the year before when she was born. Now I would be here in the first birthday. So now I don't need to quarantine, A, because the rule doesn't require you to. B, now I have this basement and I'm isolated. What I noticed though, when I was flying in Manchester airport, there were, let's say, 12 flights that day. 8 of these 12 were for Greece. So Greece was one of the few places that still then the cases were relatively going up, but it was open. Some things had changed though. Now in Greece, you definitely had to wear a mask in the supermarket. So you could sense that Greece is slowly heading towards a situation with more controls. And that's where we went to train in the CrossFit park. But still, Greece was life was mostly normal. So we had a very small with a small group of people, celebration for my niece. And we considered it even very kind of risky. So we were keeping our distances and stuff. Then I fly back to the UK. Again, airplanes full of tourists. I stay in the UK
when did you fly back?
So I fly back on the 14th of September.
Right.
In the UK, so basically the idea is I'll be back for the term for the university, because I was one of the volunteers who said I would go back for face-to-face. The back for face-to-face was that I would be once every 2 weeks in an empty lecture theater where students, if they want, they could come one by one to see me. So that was the idea, basically, that we can offer also face-to-face to the students. So basically it was a period that I was doing exactly what I was doing in Greece, working from home. And then in November, we have the new lockdown in the UK. So at that point, I realized, okay, there's not much point I'll go to Greece as soon as possible. But now to go to Greece, you need a test. So 13th of December, I'm about to fly back. And here's the riddle. My flight was on a Sunday, so I had to find a doctor who would do a test 72 hours before my flight. So I find one and I book. And then I become a bit suspicious. So I asked some bureaucrat in Greece. He says, no. It's not 72 hours before you fly. It's 72 hours before you land. Therefore, your test is 72 hours before you fly. Therefore, the test is not good. So I rearrange the text. I have to take the train to another town because in York, I couldn't find something. I pay a price that was more expensive than the ticket, and I fly back to Greece. In Greece, they keep me for another test at the airport. They never check my original test, and I arrive home. In the meanwhile, everything had changed in Greece. You needed to text the government to leave the house, as it happened in the first big lockdown, which I was not in Greece though. And because I have a British number and I cannot text the government, I need to write notes to myself on why I'm leaving the house. So there are 6 particular codes. I usually leave for the code 6, which is for walking. And also you need to wear a mask outside, which created this weird situation. There's a mountain behind my house. Everyone now walks to the mountain because it's the one place where there's no police who's going to give you a fine for this. So yeah, it was a very interesting experience how every time it would, in a way, it would escalate towards more severe measures every time. Although this did not necessarily have to do something with how the virus was going. So my biggest takeaways are 2. The one is, as I said, how important it is where you live, but 2, how important it is to live in a country with some unofficial freedoms. Let me give an example. You mentioned private doctors. Knock on wood, anytime I want something, not something important, let's say dentist. You go to the dentist in Greece who's your private dentist, maybe you give him under the table money. He doesn't cut you a receipt because who wants the tax? But this is typical in Greece. But you feel safe. You feel that if I need something, it's what Ellen said. The private doctor is, and even if there's a full lockdown, you call the private doctor and say, "Oh, technically I'm not allowed, but I'll see you. We're gonna figure it out." So this thing that Greece is known for, it's quote corruption. It's also something reassuring in a way, because you know that when you need someone, no matter what the government tells you, that person is gonna be there, and you have these networks, and these people, and your family knows someone. So even under a strict lockdown, you're going to find your plumber, you're going to find your electrician or your doctor. In the UK, I thought, look, if in the first lockdown, there's a damage in the house, I'm in trouble. But in a quote corrupt country, you don't have this problem. So 3 cheers in some ways for this autonomy that the average level of Greek society has from the government. And this makes me feel more secure, more safe. And this is why I prefer Greece. So, and this is my message to the people saying, oh, capitalism is alienating us. No, it's the government that is alienating us. It's the government that does not allow us to have this informal, let's say, arrangements with people. Like, okay, we're closed. I'm not going to come to your shop, but now I have an emergency. Can you come and fix the bathroom for example, and I'm going to give you money, you know, under the table. No one is going to see it. Everyone is happy, except from the government. Anyway, so overall, I think I've been happy. York is a good place to be. Athens is a very good place to be. So I've been, let's say, lockdown privileged, but it was an interesting experience and it taught me some things.
What I take from all the story is that you really enjoy living in your mother's basement, isn't it?
Yes, technically, I'm a basement dweller now. Yeah, I'm a basement dweller. Yes,
that's what I understood from this. That's great, man. And look, I wanted to say that even in the UK, there is some flexibility in terms of bending the rules. For example, I know that there are barbers that kind of advertise their services unofficially on social media, and they charge a premium. But you can get things done similar with repairs, with plumbers and stuff. I've had good experiences here in the UK for this as well.
That's good to know. Good to hear.
Yeah. Okay. Now, since we've pretty much almost run out of time, I would like to see if there are any questions from YouTube. Do we have anything? I don't think we do.
We have Mary Aline still. Mary Aline and Louise.
But have they got questions?
Oh, I thought they were part of the.
No.
Okay, sorry.
So I don't think we have any questions. Okay.
Also, can I say I forgot to mention one thing? I really respect what Annie did because it was like a real life in real time lesson in not leadership. How do you call it? In initiative, right? So, and that's a good lesson to pass your children that look, don't blame the situation, do something about it. So I really respect what you did, Annie.
Thank you, Nikos. I appreciate that.
Well, I mean, it's amazing, really. It's, I think when you're faced with such adversity, you have to take drastic measures, and very few people would go to that length to get what they want from life. But life is not about just survival; it's about living and pursuing your dreams. And especially with children, it's even more important to teach them this lesson. From my side, since we don't have any comments, I would just say that I work in finance, and people that know me know that I complain all the time about how regulated we are, how much the regulators over the financial industry prescribe how we should do our job, especially in terms of assessing risk. So my story is that up to when the pandemic started and when the lockdown measures started, the regulators were always keen on us to downgrade effectively the credit quality of our customers at the minute an early warning of credit deterioration would show. So say, for example, they hadn't paid on time, or something happened, or they wanted to restructure their repayment schedule for whatever reason, we had to downgrade them to reflect in our portfolio that the credit quality had dropped. Now they told us, okay, but if they're asking for a restructuring during the COVID period, you need to approve that restructuring, and you shouldn't downgrade them if the reason that they're asking for this is because of lockdown. So suddenly, to assess risk in a bank, you have to basically second guess whether the customer is asking for help because of lockdown measures or because they have problems anyway with their business model. And I think it's almost like you're not supposed to downgrade them if you think that they have problems, because the government would say, well, why aren't you supporting your customers? So it's really, it's a very tricky situation. And it's one of those where you see some controls cause problems, and then they bring more controls to fix the problems. And in the end, I think we're going to get into a situation where we will not know which parts of our portfolios have actual deterioration in their quality, and which parts are, they just suffered during lockdown and they will bounce back when the economy restarts. So, from my perspective, this was the most confusing and kind of funny situation to see that complete switch in the attitude of regulators in terms of what they expect from the financial industry. But other than that, I mean, my personal story has, I'm sure you all know it. I broke up with my partner during lockdown. I found it quite difficult to manage. I think, Dr. Ellen, it's your expertise there, your field of expertise. But I think what lockdowns did is wherever there were some problems, they accelerated and exacerbated them. But also, much like Annie's story, it's a good opportunity to take initiative and address anything that is wrong in your life, whether that is the fact that you cannot go and ride your horses, or you are in a relationship that no longer supports your pursuit of happiness. So I think we have quite a positive message at the end of all the stories. I think Annie taught us about perseverance and moving on and pursuing your happiness across borders. Ellen did the same. She left a very kind of restrictive community and moved to what sounds like paradise on earth, Florida. And Nikos went back to his mom's basement. So everyone is happy.
Yeah, just to clarify, I'm back in the UK in a couple of weeks, so no more basement. You can call me basement dweller for 2 more weeks.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay, and since we don't have any more questions, I would like to say that people that like what we do, they should become members to the Ayn Rand Center UK. To do that, you go to aynrandcenter.co.uk/membership. And you can also now follow us on Clubhouse, the new app. If you have an iPhone, I don't think it's out on Android or other devices yet. And you just need to look for Radio Ragnar, which is a great name. I think well done, Razi, for thinking that. And also to remind you that next Monday we have the Daily Objective episode, which is episode 200. So it will be a 2-hour special to celebrate the 200th episode of the Daily Objective. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to our viewers, and have a good day.
It's fun to hear your stories.
Yeah, it was fun.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
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 Bye, George. Bye, Annie. Bye, Nikos.
Thank you, and bye, everyone.
And Mary Elaine.
Right, we are off.